We've got another Tony Stewart leak. Damn, I gotta stop talking about Tony Stewart, but he doesn't give me any choice. Their things keep coming out, and this time it's a confirmation of what I reported in the last video, so we'll be talking about that. Plus, IndyCar and Indy 500 silly season news, and at the PRI show, which I have been attending and trying to get all of those scoops for you, we'll be talking about Roger Penske's interesting remarks during the PRI breakfast, because I think there are some really key details about the future of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, NASCAR, and IndyCar. Let's get into it. So Paul Tracy has finally been let go at NBC. The inevitable has happened. Tracy announced this on his Instagram as a mutual parting of ways, and it gets a thumbs down from me. I know a lot of folks, particularly on the Bird app, wanted to see Paul Tracy go, but I have to tell you that I quite enjoyed his commentary style. Sure, was he cringy at times? Yes, but at the same time, I think he brought great insight to the broadcast, and if you consider the fact that he's the first championship IndyCar driver to be a regular commentator since Bobby Unser, it's quite a shame that we have to see him go. And I think the chemistry with Townsend Bell and Lee Diffie was really the best chemistry we've seen in the booth since, again, you know, a booth involving Bobby Unser, the Bobby Unser, Paul Page, Sam Posey booth that went to legendary status. So disappointing, and really I'm not happy about this move, unless of course the heavily rumored replacement of Paul Tracy with James Hinchcliffe happens. Hinchcliffe, of course, is a very articulate, good speaker, great at explaining the sport, and he will say a lot of the right things that will make the social media mafioso happy. So I think that if Hinchcliffe does end up in Paul Tracy's seat, that's exactly the right person to take over the reins. Takuma Sato has been confirmed at Dale Coyne with Rick Ware Racing, and really to no one's surprise, this has been a badly kept secret, essentially, since it was initially rumored months ago. It should be an interesting car driver combination to watch. I would assume, if you look at it, the last two teams Takuma Sato has gone to, he has won the Indianapolis 500 with. Just saying. Speaking of the Indianapolis 500, Dreyer and Reinbold Racing dropped a little bit of a surprise on us today, confirming a two-car Indy 500 entry for the 2022 race. The drivers are one that's unsurprising and one that's very surprising. Santino Ferrucci will be joining Sage Karam at the team. The cars will be numbered 23 and 24, traditional numbers for the Dreyer and Reinbold Racing organization, an Indianapolis-based team with full-time employees that ultimately, unfortunately, really in my mind, only gets to usually run one IndyCar race per year, but they do a fantastic job of it. Sage Karam scored a top 10 in last year's Indianapolis 500 driving for Dreyer and Reinbold Racing, and as I mentioned, Santino Ferrucci has never not scored a top 10 in the Indianapolis 500. So if you look at this driver combination, in terms of the free agents on the market, kind of like I mentioned last time when I talked about Santino really has been the guy, and if you can get him, it seems you're almost guaranteed a top 10 at the Indy 500, and Dreyer and Reinbold has proven that they are able to get that. And if you think about it, if Sage and Santino are able to gel and they are able to produce a really good 1-2 punch as a teammate combination, you start to ask the question. I don't know if you can quite get to the point where you can realistically say, hey, a Dreyer and Reinbold car could win the Indianapolis 500. But I think you're looking at a very, very competitive combination here. And, you know, I got to be careful with predictions with the Indy 500 now because, of course, I predicted Elio would win, and everybody thinks now that I'm going to make them lots of money when I make predictions. You know, on paper, this looks like a slam dunk. But, of course, the reason we have the Indianapolis 500 in the way it is with the practice and qualifying and the race itself is that it's unpredictable. The things that are stated on the paper that may look great sometimes don't turn out great. But at least as this stands right now, I am fully thumbs up with this move. Tony Stewart, we got to talk about him. We're probably going to be talking about him a couple more times over the next couple of days. But we have a leak. As I reported on Tuesday, Tony Stewart will announce a return to the NASCAR cockpit at the Indianapolis road course for the Xfinity race, and that announcement is coming on Friday. And now we have a confirmation of that return thanks to a t-shirt leak from Fanatics, which states, "Welcome back, Tony, Stewart-Haas Racing and number 14. So, again, this isn't Dodge yet. But Tony was at PRI today. He did not announce anything for his NHRA program and certainly not his NASCAR program. This is what I can tell you because I listened in on Tony's panel. Tony mentioned sponsors and partners that will be with his NHRA team. Partners that not only transfer over from the Don Schumacher racing team, in which Tony has bought a lot of his equipment. That equipment, especially in the funny car division where you have individual car bodies, is Dodge. He also mentioned Leah Pruitt and one of her partners and sponsors, his wife. He was very much dodging what I believe is the obvious, which is Tony Stewart is going to announce a Dodge partnership. I'm beginning to wonder now if there's some sort of a contract in place in which they cannot mention it until the first of the year. I'm happy to eat my words, and I guess we'll reconvene in January to see if I'm right. But a lot of these contracts sometimes go to the end of the year. It's one of the things, if you're paying attention to IndyCar and IMSA racing right now. Meyer Shank Racing is being very hush-hush about Simon Pagenaud participating in team activities because technically, until the first of the year, he's still a Team Penske employee. So it's kind of one of those things where it's interesting how contracts work. So I'm beginning to wonder if the rumors that came out of Mopar Insider maybe are a little bit misplaced. I think it was a good guess that potentially you could see Tony Stewart making a Mopar announcement, a partnership announcement at PRI, but it looks like at this point that's probably not going to happen. I think the big Tony Stewart announcement we are going to get is the NASCAR return, which of course is tomorrow. That shirt confirms it. But again, take it to the shank. I think we are getting a Tony Stewart Dodge announcement very, very soon. And finally, Roger Penske was speaking at PRI today, and what I want to do right now is just kind of go through a lot of the notes that I scribbled down and tweeted out for my Twitter followers. If you don't follow me on Twitter, check that out. There are some spicy takes on there, so be warned. But I want to just talk about some of these key points because Roger doesn't give a whole lot of interviews. I don't know if you guys have noticed this. So a lot of things that happen with Penske Entertainment, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, IndyCar, we're kind of in the dark for months and months and months, and then Roger dumps a whole bunch of information. Now, Roger said, in my opinion, a whole lot without actually saying a whole lot, if that makes sense. I think he deflected a lot. I think, in a lot of ways, there were some questions that I think we wanted answers, but at the same time, we got a very, very candid Roger Penske on a particular race that he wants at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So the first kind of thing that I thought was important enough to talk about is that Roger Penske has invested $20 million in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway since the purchase. That is on top of the Project 100, $100 million that was loaned to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Corporation by the Indiana government. Now Roger Penske, and I assume that the 20 to 22 million that he stated today came directly out of Roger Penske's coffers. A lot of that went to like remodeling bathrooms and stuff like that. Penske wants IMS to be carbon neutral in the next 10 years. And he mentioned that sustainability and diversity are two of the major goals for the future of IMS. I would certainly say that if you are someone who actually attends IMS, those are probably disappointing goals. Not so much that they shouldn't be goals. Don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of people look at, say, the grandstands and say, well, when do you tear those down and redo them? Because if you look at, say, for example, Daytona, that is a very, very modern facility. And Indianapolis is certainly behind the times in terms of the spectator experience. And for something that Roger Penske talks about so much, I was surprised to not hear. But again, it's really easy to say you want to be carbon neutral and you want to pursue diversity because those are the talking points that are going to get you brownie points, and then you don't have to answer tough questions. So I understand that. He's not going to say, we're going to tear down all the grandstands and rebuild them. That's not going to be what he says at an industry breakfast, right? Speaking of the diversity angle, Roger Penske confirmed what we already know, and that is that Ernie Francis Jr. will drive for Force Indy in the Indy Lights division next season. So that's exciting. Ernie Francis certainly, I think, is a top prospect. He proved that on a national stage with the SRX, and he's certainly been proving it. He's won Formula Car races. He's won Trans Am races. He really does look like he's the real deal. It'll be exciting to see what he does when he gets to Indy Lights. This was Roger Penske's big point and the big takeaway I had from this talk that Roger Penske gave, and that is Roger Penske wants a long-distance sports car race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The two manufacturers that he mentioned specifically that would be partners potentially in that would be BMW, which is building a facility on the inside of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which will be a testing ground and a driver school for BMW customers, and I assume other people want to pay just to have a driving school experience. And of course, Porsche, which is the factory team that Roger Penske will be bringing to not only IMSA, but the World Endurance Championship starting in the next 2 years. We'll get back to sports cars because Roger said more. But the other thing that I thought was interesting, and of course this is one that is near and dear to my heart, is that Roger was talking about the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum and needing to take that to the next level. Now, I love the folks at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. They've been very good to me. But I think, even they would tell you that the place needs to be upgraded. There are so many treasures in there that need to be not only preserved in a modern facility, but also displayed in a modern facility. And, again, it's kind of like a lot of things at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's a gorgeous place, but some of the things there have fallen behind the times. And certainly I think the museum has the potential to be a true centerpiece to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, even more than it is now, because certainly for a lot of people, it's their very first experience at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Doug Bowles chimed in from time to time, and he gave some great insight, as Doug usually does. And specifically, Doug talked Formula One, and this is a direct quote that I wrote down. We want to host that at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Specifically, he talked about how the Speedway is a Grade 1 circuit and that it's one of two Grade 1 circuits currently in the United States, the other being Circuit of the Americas. So it's very interesting that Indianapolis, and this was not, I don't believe Formula One was really even a prompted question from the host, Ralph Shaheen of Speed Sport News. So interesting that it was voluntarily brought up by the IMS folks. Penske mentioned Larson. It was very brief, but it was very direct, and I got the direct quote. I wrote the direct quote down. Roger said, "We want to put him in a speedway car at some point." Speedway car, if you're an older gentleman like Roger is, generally is a way that you would say an Indy car. Speedway car, champ car, those kind of terms were used before IndyCar was kind of the vernacular. So Roger, and he said it very fast. He was talking about the dirt race at IMS, which, by the way, Roger Penske's like gung-ho on now. He even said he wanted to enhance that event. But he was talking about how Kyle Larson was so talented and then dropped the line, "We want to put him in a speedway car at some point." He said it very fast. So, yes, Roger Penske wants Kyle Larson at the Indy 500. He stated it, so make of that what you will. RP's talking to two manufacturers for IndyCar, third manufacturer. Said one that one is in the late stages. We can presume, and I can tell you with pretty strong certainty, that one of those is Toyota, and the one that is in the late stages is 99% Toyota. Who the other one could be, that's a question. I know a lot of people's hearts, and I know my heart would say Ford. I would love Ford. My brain says Hyundai. Just a guess. Roger Penske started talking a little bit about the next-gen car, and this is where it got a little bit spicy. Roger said, we haven't got exactly what we want yet when he talked about the NASCAR next-gen car. He talked about the possibility of racing it on street circuits. He talked about the similarities between the next-gen car and the V8 supercar, which, of course, I didn't put on my desk today when I actually talk about V8 supercars. But, of course, Penske was in supercars for quite a few years, was able to get the young Kiwi here, Scott McLaughlin, from that series and bring him over here. Yeah, it's interesting that Roger would make that comparison. Nathan Brown got this quote, so I want to say, and that got a ton of traction on Twitter, that when he was asked about his thoughts about the next-gen car from Ralph Shaheen, he said, I wish I could tell you, and then he finished up with the, we haven't gotten exactly what we want yet quote. So, very interesting. Penske got back on the sports car train. He reached out to Porsche, actually, believe it or not. So, Porsche wasn't, the way I interpreted it is that Porsche wasn't necessarily looking at doing an LMDH program to go to Le Mans and the World Endurance Championship in IMSA. Penske went and reached out to them and said, I want to do a Le Mans program. Porsche said, okay. So the team name will actually be called Penske Porsche Motorsport. Interesting that he dropped the team name today. He also talked about some of his drivers that he would have. Didn't give any names. He said some of them would be hard for him to pronounce. Make of that what you will. He got back on the sports car bandwagon, though, of course, IMS does actually have a sports car race, the Indy 8 Hours. Penske said, we got to be sure, Doug, that we get a sports car race, meaning a sports car endurance race with prototypes. He mentioned and invoked the Daytona endurance race. So I begin to think, 24-hour race? We, of course, know that Penske had a sports car that tested at night. And one thing that I also learned today is that, oh boy, when I filmed that, I ruffled some feathers over at Team Penske. I'll just say this. I could say there may or may not have been one of the drivers represented on this table who was driving that car. But I didn't say that. I just filmed the car. I don't know. Interesting. Fun stuff. I'll put it this way to you guys. Obviously, Roger wants an endurance race. Wants it bad. I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to see night racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. No, that does not mean permanent lights, but I definitely think we're going to get it. And that's how I'll leave this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Subscribe for more motorsport content, and I will see you in the next video.